Well, good morning, everybody. It's 9:30, and we're going to go ahead and get started. We are recording this session, so it will be available for you online for future reference or if you'd like to share throughout your organization. So welcome to the California History Social Science Framework Overview for Administrators. I'm Yvonne Contreras. I'm the Director of Curriculum Instruction here at the Los Angeles County Office of Education. And it's our pleasure to spend this morning with you and walk you through some information that you may or may not have, maybe take a little deeper dive into our new framework. I think we can still call it new. And also the additional supports that are being offered through the California Department of Education at no cost. So we're excited to be able to bring this to you this morning. And so let's start out with a message from David Gordon. David Gordon is the County Superintendent of the Sacramento County Office of Education. And the Sacramento County Office of Education is the lead on the content literacy, inquiry, and civics portion of the framework, which is a deeper dive into the framework. So let's hear what Dave has to say.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here today. I'm inspired by the important work you're doing because now more than ever, critical thinking and civil dialogue are crucial to preserving our democracy. Congratulations on the success of the framework rollouts. And now, on to phase 2. The new History Social Science framework is groundbreaking because it places inquiry and action at the center of the student's experience. We also focus on building regional capacity through communities of practice so that your great work can reach as many administrators, teachers, and paraprofessionals as possible. I'm so excited that for the first time in memory, we have an opportunity to fundamentally shift the way we think about history, social science, education in California through these communities of practice. The work ahead is difficult, but well worth it. You have our respect, our support, and together we will make a big difference in the lives of students and educators. And in the process, we'll do our part to ensure our Republic's health and longevity. Thank you and good luck today in your efforts.
So Dave gave us a great overview of the work that has been done on the framework and then the additional work that we're going to present to you this morning. But first we want to give you a little bit of an overview and question to consider as we move through our presentation this morning. So question 1, what does the new framework ask us and our students? Question 2, why are we being asked to do this? And question 3, how will we implement this? So these are the questions that are going to drive our inquiry as we move through our presentation. So what's our why? From the Secretary of Education, 1993 to 2000, Richard Riley, take a minute and read that why. I think we've all heard as we are preparing our students for college and career and civic life that we're preparing them for jobs that don't yet exist. Technologies that existed 10 years ago, technologies that existed 2 years ago have gone much past that. So how can we begin to support our students, the learning of our students, to prepare them for a world that we're not quite sure what is going to bring them? How can we help them be problem solvers and critical thinkers as they enter this world? So we have the California History Social Science Framework. It was updated on July 14th, and the focus is on content, literacy, inquiry, and citizenship. That framework is available. It's over 1,000 pages. It's available on that on the link below. We would suggest that you not run it off because it is about phone book size, but that you take pertinent chapters from that are important to your grade levels, whether it be elementary, middle, or high school, and then look at the various chapters that deal with a variety of topics, everything from access and equity to professional learning, to English learners, and all of those aspects. There are not new standards, but the framework gives us a new opportunity to how we look at the content, the inquiry, the curriculum, and the civic learning. So a little bit of the background of how that framework came to be. The work began in 2008, over 10 years ago, and it was initially developed, the focus group began to look at it between 2008 and 2009. There was a little bit of a legislative suspension around all frameworks, but then it resumed again in the fall of 2014. It had 2 field reviews with over 11,000 public comments. I don't know if any of you were able to see some of the lines out of the board meetings at CDE, but there were a lot of people interested, and also special groups wanting to make sure that their historical perspective was adequately represented in the framework. Extensive revisions to the draft were in response to these comments. So, some legislation addressed in the framework. We've got the Fair Education Act, 21st Century Skills, Financial Literacy, the Filipino-American contribution to the Farm Labor Union, Constitution and other primary documents, the Bracero Program, the Armenian Genocide, the Filipino-American contributions to World War II, the presidency of Barack Obama, and voter education are all included in this new framework. Some features of the new framework are the role of the framework and local flexibility. We all know that we're in the era of LCFF, Local Control Funding, Local Control Accountability Program. So there is flexibility in how the role of the framework is presented in your schools and districts. There's some new course descriptions. There's new chapters, as I mentioned earlier: assessment, universal access, instructional strategies, professional learning are all included in this document. And some new appendices with some many, many more resources that are available to you. It's collaborative and cross-disciplinary. I think one of the hallmarks of this framework is that it just brings together content areas, vertical teamings, both in elementary, middle, and high school, and gives social studies teachers an opportunity to collaborate across curriculum with other disciplines. There's that link between the history social science instruction, Common Core, English language arts. There is a huge literacy initiative in it, and the California ELD standards. There's again the suggestions for teachers on how to work cross-disciplinary, and more than 20 classroom examples of how this is aligned to history social science, our Common Core state standards, and English language development. I'm going to hand this over to Michelle Herzog, and she's going to walk you through this next piece. Michelle?
Good morning, and thanks, Yvonne. Before we start, I want to give a shout out of appreciation to Yvonne. In addition to being the division director here at LACO for curriculum instruction, she also serves as the chair of the CISC subcommittee for history social science. So thank you, Yvonne, for all your help. We're going to quickly go over the main 4 central themes of the framework real quickly. The first one on the next slide deals with content. So you remember that, the next slide. Do you remember that old commercial, "Where's the beef?" Well, the beef is still front and center in teaching history social science, but hopefully you're not just looking at history, but you're also integrating in civics and geography, economics, humanities. All of these disciplines need to be woven in if we're going to truly understand the events that occurred in the past and what's happening today. The next thing talks about another approach for looking at content and maybe looking at it through the context of themes. So themes around in U.S. history, around movement or identity or freedom might frame how you introduce the series of events that occurred throughout time. In ancient civilization, world history, you might think about it in the context of sites of encounter or the environment, man's impact on the environment, or how the environment impacted the decisions that people made. The next theme is around inquiry. So as you know, as an administrator, there's a major thrust now in inquiry-driven instruction in science, in Common Core, in mathematics. Well, this brings history, social science into that same pedagogical thinking and operation. And the C3 framework for social studies state standards, now this is a different framework. It has not been adopted by the state of California. It's a national document. You'll hear some more about it later, but it really provides a wonderful resource on how to go about providing inquiry-driven instruction. The next slide talks a little bit more about what we mean about student inquiry. So, as you can imagine, we're trying to get away from maybe history class you had back in the day, where we had a lecture, we read the book, we answered questions, we memorized stuff, and then took that test on Friday. Well, we're trying to get away from that and really use those high-level critical thinking skills. So just as you see in the second bullet, students need the intellectual power to recognize societal problems, and there are many, as we know, ask good questions, and develop robust investigations into them. Consider possible solutions and consequences, separate evidence-based claims from parochial opinions, and communicate and act on what they learn. I'm sure you agree this makes really good sense for teaching, but if we don't approach curriculum and teaching and learning in this way, how will they develop those capacities to do that kind of deep thinking and application? And of course, the next theme talks about literacy. Literacy has always been an integral part of history, social science. And I know this is challenging for a lot of social studies teachers because, let's face it, a lot of them chose to teach social studies because they loved the subject. They didn't love it necessarily because they loved being a reading teacher and English teacher, but we know that in order to, as I say, get to the good stuff, we need to provide the supports in our history classes and science classes and math classes for kids to access difficult informational text, complex text, and all of that. The next slide, as you know, Common Core, you're very familiar. Districts across California, and I'd say the nation, in many, many states, have worked hard to implement the Common Core state standards in their various formats to teachers. I'm assuming that your teachers have too. So let's connect the dots for them and ask them, what do you remember about Common Core? What are those expectations for Common Core that speak to us as social studies? And they should be able to pull that out. The emphasis on informational, nonfiction text, well, that's all over the place for us. The need for expository writing with evidence to support claims, that's Common Core. That's social studies too. The use of academic vocabulary when speaking and listening, Common Core, but also social studies. So it shouldn't be an either or. These are things that should be familiar for a lot of our teachers anyway. And finally, our last theme, of course, the one we think is most exciting, is on citizenship. And as you know, this is a new emphasis. And I would say we need to give a lot of credit to our California Chief Justice, who led an effort back in 2011 to bring together a task force of stakeholders, not just social studies folks, but higher ed, CSBA, AXA, CTA, all of those folks who came together to realize if we're going to prepare the next generation to be informed and actively engaged, responsible citizens, we need to provide them the support, the training, the learning to know how to do that. And this task force report that came out in 2014 identified a number of recommendations so that civic learning would become available, not just in 12th grade government class, but for all students beginning in elementary school. So thanks to her leadership and the leadership of a number of others, citizenship now is a core theme of this history social science framework. And see, if you've studied history at all, look at these various topics, okay? These are topics that are certainly in our headlines today, crossing our news feeds and news programs. Now, think about it. Are these new in 2019? I would argue no. If you studied ancient civilization, medieval times, U.S. history, you would find that many of these issues existed then. So let's help kids connect the dots, all right? So when they're studying the Black Plague of Europe, well, that's a disease and pandemic. Is that an issue today? What have we learned from the past to help us address some of these very important issues happening today? Connect the dots for kids. Have them learn what they learned before, apply it to help them solve these problems in today's world. And we created another resource. This is the Civic Learning Compendium that goes along with the History Social Science Framework. And in the Google link that you were sent, where you can find all of the resources and materials that go with this webinar, you'll find a copy of that compendium. It copies and pastes history descriptions all the way through from K through 12. And on the right side of the column of the table are some civic learning activities that you could draw kids' attention to, connecting past to present, getting them engaged in addressing some of these very important issues today. So use that as a resource to make history come alive and relevant for what we're doing today. So in a nutshell, you'll see that's the acronym CLICK: Content, Literacy, Inquiry, and Citizenship. And this CLICK project, as Yvonne is describing, funded by the state legislature through the Department of Education and directed by the Sacramento County Office of Education, is providing lots of resources and support at no cost for you. And you'll see again, just on the next slide, how these four all kind of weave together, all right? And you can see the subheadings on there if you continue to click. We loaded this PowerPoint in the Google Drive for you as well, for you to reuse and take back to your sites to be helpful. So when you're talking about content, here's just an example. You're going to talk about, if it's early American Constitution, the framers, the preamble. They need to know these things. What's in the Bill of Rights? Everyone's talking about Constitution now. Do kids know what's in the Constitution? What does it say? What does it not say? There's constitutional scholars who are still debating some of these issues right now. Can Congress do that? Can the president do that? We get those answers by digging into content. In inquiry, what were the motivations of these framers? Why were they creating a whole new government? That's no easy lift. Why were they starting out? Were they starting from scratch? Or were they copying from other institutions or from other democracies in the past? Literacy. You can't access those important documents if you're not able to do a close reading of them, if you're not able to deconstruct them. And let's not forget our English learners. If you're not providing those supports for English learners to access that background learning, to provide meaning to that, to help them really understand what's in those documents and how they apply to the world today. And finally, like I said, our most exciting is application of history to the today. Citizenship and civics is all about. The lessons of the past will always remain in the past if we don't connect the dots to today. Why do we need to learn this stuff? How many times have you heard kids say that? Maybe at your own dining room table. Well, this is why. Because what happened before is happening again. And we need to learn from that to be able to help kids address these problems so they don't repeat themselves. So we have we're going to take a little time out. We're going to give you a little activity. If you were able to get in the Google Drive, we added in there the first chapter 1 of the framework. And if you would take some time now and download that document, we want to give you about 5 minutes or so to quickly skim, and it'll give you a deeper look at these four themes. There's also a handout in there you can use now or share in a future activity to take some notes. And we would recommend, if you're doing a department meeting or introducing this is a great activity to start. Let your teachers read chapter 1 and kind of dig into it as a first look. So we'll pause for a minute and give you some time to do that as well.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm going to kind of bring up that first chapter. Just asking you to use your best skimming skills to kind of look at this first chapter. So we're going to kind of move on. You can see it's not a long chapter. It's with, less than really 20 pages of information regarding what this could look like, what it should look like. Obviously, as Michelle indicated earlier, it has strong connections to the ELA/ELD framework. It's patterned after that similar format so that we can easily see those connections between the two. And of course, the history social science framework is not trying to make English teachers out of our history social science teachers, but certainly to show those connections. I think as we have those face-to-face discussions, as we did with the framework rollouts throughout California, one of the areas that most of our teachers commented on was that even though we are not a tested content area, most of the examples in the CASP rely heavily on readings and informational text from history social studies. So it behooves us to make those connections and to support each other as we delve more into this. We have new textbooks, not new standards, but this framework is a guide for ongoing professional learning as we move through the various areas of content, literacy, inquiry, and civics. As Michelle said, that this is a kind of a graphic organizer that you can use either with your, oops, here we go. But we wanted to show you a short video of what this looks like in action in a 5th grade classroom. This is one of our teachers in LA County. She's Rebecca Valbuena. She's also one of our content literacy, inquiry, and civics coaches. So you'll meet her later in some more slides. But let's take a look at what it looks like in a 5th grade classroom.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States.
The College Career and Civic Life C3 Framework for Social Studies State Standards was a collaborative effort over 3 years. It included social studies teachers from across the nation, heads of social studies at state departments of education, institutes of higher education, and a number of social studies professional organizations who all lent their expertise and excitement for increasing the rigor and relevance of social studies for students across America. We all know how it's important to prepare kids for college and career. We also believe that social studies is the subject best suited to prepare them to be effective citizens in the 21st century. The lesson you're about to see, led by Rebecca Valbuena at Glendora School District, will show you what it looks like in the classroom for 5th grade students as they develop their understanding of constitutional principles and apply it in the real world to prepare them to be engaged citizens in the 21st century.
We're going to be doing some reading today, so I would like you to take out the Constitution book from your book basket. The series of lessons is designed to help students investigate the importance of civic involvement and that they understand their role as citizens now and into adulthood. Throughout the lessons, they learn how and why people participate in the democratic process. They study the fundamental principles of the Constitution and how the Constitution changed over time. One of the biggest goals of the series is that students can describe a government that is by the people, a government in which citizens exercise their power by voting. We do have rights, and our rights are one, and it's voting that protects those rights. So having the power to vote is part of living in a democracy. The ultimate goal is that students are involved now and that they continue to be involved into adulthood. In a perfect world, I'd want them to register to vote the second they turn 18 and exercise that right to vote into adulthood.
Dimension 1 begins with a question, an inquiry. We want students to get excited about learning social studies, and so we start with what we call a compelling question. Today's compelling question will ask students, why is it important to vote, and does it really matter? The idea is to get them excited about learning their subject.
Voting matters because your voice can be heard and you can make decisions based on how you feel and your opinions. Yeah.
Dimension 2 is about applying disciplinary tools and concepts, not just looking through the lens of history or economics or geography or civics or the other humanities, but looking at them in interrelated ways and also connecting to reading language arts. Dimension 3 is about evaluating sources and gathering evidence to respond to the compelling question.
Tabulate our data. So Gavin, would you go ahead and explain the data to us?
In the age range 18 to 25, we had 8 people say that voting does matter, and 6 people say that it doesn't matter.
The fourth and final dimension, probably the most exciting, is communicating conclusions and taking informed action to get out in the world and really make a difference.
I want you to exercise your right to vote.
They wanted to help solve the societal problem that they discovered for themselves. They were able to conclude that, yes, voting does matter. They didn't really understand why, if people were registered to vote, that they didn't go out and vote. This idea of voter apathy came into play. And we decided as a class that we could do something about it. When you can dig deeply into the curriculum and students have a voice and it's driven by their questions, that we're able to make it more meaningful and fun. And when learning's meaningful and fun and motivating, it's successful.
Whether your state has adopted the C3 framework or not, we hope you can utilize this document as a framework for increasing the rigor and relevance of social studies, making it exciting and engaging for your students, and sharing with them skills and ideas for taking real action in the real world. Our goal is to create an engaged, informed citizenry, and providing opportunities for students to do that. This framework allows you to take the work that you're doing and try to enhance it in ways that can build those civic skills, knowledge, and dispositions.
I think we can see there from Rebecca's class that the Republic is in good hands. Those are 5th graders, and exciting things that they're doing and really making a difference as they move through the curriculum. So wanted to talk a little bit about the CLIck project, which is that, as we said earlier, that second phase in the framework implementation. It is at no cost. And we have a variety of supports for you all across California. I'm going to talk a little bit later about some of the things that we're doing in LA County. But you can see in 16-17, that was the framework adoption and rollout. We had about 20 of them across the state, from the Oregon border all the way down to San Diego. And so well attended, hundreds of thousands of teachers and administrators attended those across the state. So 2017-18 is that stage 2, the deepening the understanding, that continued framework rollout, and now the State Board of Education and CDE has given us some funding to continue with it. So right now we're in stage 3, and that is the planning and instruction. This is the continuing of the framework implementation, the CLIck project, and communities of practice. And I'm going to get into that in just a little bit. And as we go in now into the 2019-20, we're looking at full alignment of instruction, framework implementation, and continue to deepen those communities of practice. So what kind of support for teachers and students is critical? Well, as I said earlier, CDE and the Sacramento County Office of Ed have developed an infrastructure that's providing us with some professional learning opportunities and resources to get a deeper implementation of the framework. It's going to build upon the success of the standards implementation with CDE and the resources that the county offices have to share with across the state. It's got several components to it. There's statewide and regional communities of practice. We'll talk a little bit about that. There's specialized resources and critical topics that are mandated by law. We have some resources on this. Lots of online resources for teachers and administrators. Some of them you've received in the Google Docs, and we'll have links for more of those as we continue through our Zoom meeting. And then, of course, that all-important coaching support, that one-on-one within the communities, practices, and districts where coaches can come out and support your history, social science content areas and teachers as they implement the framework. So phase 2 of our current framework rollout is this a project that's building upon that important work. It's a project with the CHP, SPP, and SECESA. SECESA is the organization, the County Superintendent's Organization. And we want to build everybody's familiarity with the frameworks, and then how do we focus on the implementation in their classrooms. And you can see from the picture there of these gears working symbiotically with each other. So inquiry, extremely important. Michelle highlighted that. Those guiding questions, those critical questions that have that begin students on that journey of digging deeper into a project, a question. You saw in Rebecca's little vignette of her 5th graders. Why do we need to vote? What's the importance of it? They discovered voter apathy. We know that that is prevalent across the nation. So what can they do to begin to encourage and motivate their fellow students, and then ultimately the citizenry of their communities to vote? Teachers are going to be supported in this endeavor by utilizing their own systematic inquiry process that can apply to any content area. And then we all know that that personalized learning experience is so important for students. So here's kind of a diagram of what the regional approach is. Each of the SECESA regions, and there are 11 of them throughout the state, has a community of practice that they can engage in. It's an opportunity to share professional learning, to deepen that content and pedagogy with history, social science teachers. It's a networking opportunity for sharing these best practices. And then there's the opportunity for regional action planning. So those areas, for example, LA County is a region. We've got Ventura, San Diego, and a variety throughout the state. We'll share those with you in a little bit. These individuals will in turn facilitate those regional communities of practice with teachers, administrators, and paraprofessionals. So again, a unique way for educators to come together and share these best practices, look deeper into the framework, and be provided with coaching support. So again, it's working through the county superintendent's regional structure and certain county offices of education. They serve as leads in the project, and they are supporting the regional communities of practice. There's funding available based on a formula that
I'm on a webinar.
An amount and accounts for student enrollment and access for educators in rural communities.
Come here.
So there are opportunities for some of our far-reaching counties to become involved in this.
Yeah, come here.
There is a number of resources, including financial, to help support this. So county offices of education are participating in this effort, and here's their roles and responsibilities. Establish a team of individuals across the region who are going to participate in the statewide community of practice. So there's some requirements, some obligations to attend these, and they're in various locations across the state. Become familiar with that inquiry-based approach to teaching and learning. Recruit other teachers and administrators and paraeducators to participate in the regional community of practices. And then facilitate their own regional community of practice, providing some instruction, some model lessons, inquiry-based approach, and either at a school site, maybe virtually like we're doing with this overview, with this webinar, and or between these communities of practice sessions. but those are all available. And again, I can't emphasize enough, this is the first time in my recollection that we have been given the funding to do this, so it is no additional cost to your sites or your districts. So here are the lead county offices. In Region 1, Mendocino is the lead. Region 2, Tehama. Region 3, Sacramento, and they are the lead for the entire project. See, Region 4 is Marin County Office. Region 5 would be the Monterey County Office of Ed. Region 6, Stanislaus County Office of Ed. Region 7 is the Tulare County Office. Region 8 is Ventura. Region 9 is San Diego. Region 10 is San Bernardino. And of course, Region 11 is our county office, and that's Los Angeles. So those are the leads. We have in your packet or your Google link the name and the email address of the actual leads from each of those county offices. So, access and equity for all. I think we've seen this picture. I love this picture. There's always also a picture of where they're watching a baseball game and there's a fence, and we always wonder, well, why is there a fence? So this is a great picture of showing what it means to be equal, and then what it means to have equity. And I think we all see that it's different scaffolds for different students so that they can all reach that goal. So through the inquiry focus, teachers will be supported as they work to deepen their content understanding and then develop that literacy and promote engagement for all California students and families. And you saw, if you were just briefly reading, skimming through that first chapter, the number of students in our state who are English learners and need those extra support, the number of students who are special needs students and also need that special support to help them have that equity. So we're excited about this initiative. Specialized resources, lots of these. And you can see that there are several organizations with special expertise in topics, and these have been specified in that legislation. That was that one slide that was earlier. And they're developing resources using the inquiry process on these. So special topics include the Armenian genocide, that Filipino American contributions to labor movement, their Bracero program, the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender LGBT contributions to history and civics education, all of these by legislative action. There's a number of online resources for administrators on how you can support your teachers in their efforts to implement this framework. And so we'll have access to that for you, again, at no cost. So we want to look at a seamless integrated system of support. That's the entire vision for the state of California across all content areas, across all plans, is to really not look at the several plans we had years ago, but really integrate those plans into a single plan for student success. So it begins with communities of practice with a common focus on inquiry. The statewide, regional, and local support for implementation, a support for access and equity for all, and then those specialized resources. Again, all of those available to you in this additional support from CDE. So you can see the statewide communities of practice, again, stems from those regional teams that focus on an inquiry-based approach, and then cross-regional collaboration and planning. And I think that's a critical piece, that a time to come together and share resources, share strategies, share best practices, to take them back to our region and then share them with our administrators and our teachers in our regions. So as we look to deepening our understanding of the framework and focus on these conversations, prior to this new framework, the questions would be, what is this new framework? How do I teach the framework? How am I going to be held accountable? And those are important questions, but we really need to look deeper into that. And as we began our session today, we looked at the vision of preparing students for a world that right now doesn't exist, with technologies that don't exist. So instead of framing it around level 1 questions, let's look at what promise does the framework hold for all of our students. We know that California is such a diverse student population. So what promise does it hold for them? How can we best implement the framework? This isn't what I call a one and done. This is an ongoing journey, and with 1,200 pages to the framework, it is an opportunity for 1,200 pages of professional learning over time. And how do we ensure that all of our students succeed? Not just the few, not just the students who maybe have strong reading skills, but how can we all support each other from various content areas to ensure that all of our students in California are successful? So based on what we've learned so far, what specific instructional strategies should we see, and what specific types of tasks should students be engaged in? I'm going to take a minute and kind of think about that question. As administrators, when you walk into a social studies classroom, and you walk into a geography classroom, or a US history classroom, or an econ classroom, or an elementary, when you walk into that classroom, much like Ms. Balbuena's, what kinds of things, instructional strategies should we see? What kinds of tasks should students be engaged in? And then our compelling question as an administrator: how might we as administrators best support the proper implementation of the new history social science framework? Again, as Michelle mentioned earlier, it's not when I was in school, we're going to read the chapter, we're going to answer the questions, we're going to look at some vocabulary words, and we're going to have a test on Friday. And chapter by chapter, we plowed through that history social studies book. Sometimes we got to World War II, mostly we didn't. So how can we now begin to look at, because we don't have new standards, but we do have new textbooks, a multitude of resources, and an amazing framework that can guide social studies in the 21st century schools, that can prepare students for college, career, and civic life. And how can I, as a school leader, support that teaching and learning of history, social science? How can I begin to have those conversations with all of my teachers so that we can integrate this work and work smarter, not harder? So these should be familiar to you. These are our 8 state priorities. So how does inquiry-driven instruction in history, social science help us meet these 8 priorities? Well, we know that priority 2 is state standards. How can we then support our teachers with deep implementation of those California state standards at a level of higher rigor? Inquiry will do that. Parent involvement. Parents need to know about this. How might we add opportunities for parents to kind of become engaged and learn a little bit more about this? Certainly, we didn't see the whole video of Rebecca's classroom, but a lot of that data that they collected was from questions they asked at home of family and neighbors. So to begin to take that outside of the 4 walls of the classroom. Certainly, we know that pupil achievement will be supported as we begin to help students think deeper, think in different ways, have a more rigorous opportunity to show that they're learning, and have those equity supports for our students who are English learners and students with students with disabilities. Pupil engagement. Students who are engaged in school, who like what's going on, who feel challenged, come to school. I've always said the best discipline plan is a great lesson plan. So those students are engaged, they want to be in class, their behaviors are such that they're not being suspended, their attendance is regular. So all of those pieces play into these 8 state priorities. School climate increases. It's a great place to be. We like our school, our teachers care, they're teaching us. We're doing things that are relevant. Not to say that all worksheets are bad, but when they think back on the experiences that they've had in elementary, middle, or high school, they're going to remember those actions that were beyond the 4 walls of the classroom. That really got them to think and to work more rigorously with others to solve a problem. Course access. making sure that all of our students have access to a rigorous course pattern of courses and opportunities that prepare them for college and career, civic life, to be active and engaged citizens in our democracy. And then those other people outcomes of making sure that students have access to wraparound services and those pieces that give them social and emotional support and learning. So we know that the LCAP is an important document because if it's in the LCAP with actions and services, then there's funding attached to it. So while the CLIC project will provide funding for professional development and professional learning, we would hope that in conversations and in focus groups, as you begin to look at your LCAP, that you also include language around history and social studies. So here's an example from San Diego Unified School District. So their goal 2 was access to a broad and challenging curriculum. And enriched and enhanced learning opportunities actually calls out social studies in their actions and services. So they want to, in addition to the core content areas, include social studies and physical education. So those 2 are going to now have some funding behind them. Here's another example from Sweetwater Union High School District. They want to ensure excellence in teaching and learning so that each student is prepared to succeed in college and career. We know that college and career indicator is now part of the dashboard. And so as schools and districts are looking for ways to measure that, including this in your LCAP is a great strategy. In Sweetwater, they're going to do professional development around the California state standards. They're going to focus on literacy skills. Oh, there's a link to history social studies. They're going to look at first quality instruction, best first instruction. And they've actually called out the ELA, ELD math, history social science, and science. They're going to do professional development and work within PLCs and cohorts on growth mindsets. So all of those will be included in their actions and services. And again, funding will be provided through the district for that, ongoing support. So we want to ensure that, that you have a voice and that you encourage at the district level for that history social science to be part of your LCAP. But as we deepen our understanding of the framework and we shift from that very low level of what is this framework, how will I be accountable, we keep in mind, again, that promise for all students, that the best way to implement the framework, and then ensure that all students succeed. And by using that, those buckets of the 8 state priorities, we can assure that we begin to look at these 3 critical questions. So administrators, what's our next steps? What do we do? How do we help our teachers begin to think about the framework in a different way? So we want to become a little familiar with the history social science framework. Certainly we're not going to read the whole thing from cover to cover, but there are key chapters in there that really are important. Chapter 1 is just a really good overview. If you're an elementary principal, you want to read those elementary chapters. Middle school, and then high school for the content specifics. You can look at your LCAP language and begin to ask for some language in the LCAP to support history, social studies, professional learning. Provide time and space for collaboration of your teachers. And maybe as a department, might be nice to look at a vertical team if you're elementary, 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. Include in our secondary schools, English language arts, ELD teachers in a collaborative group, even special needs students teachers, so that they can have an opportunity to look at their important parts of the framework, dissect it, and see how can we then begin to frame instruction around these chapters. So look at the instructional shifts do a really thorough job of the evaluation of instructional materials. That's really important. The local control has given us that ability to look at our student population, delve deeply into the data, and decide exactly what meets the needs of our students and the ability of our teachers to deliver that. Lesson development and revision, giving people time to look at their lessons, talk about them, maybe observe each other teaching, and give feedback, and then improve upon that. So all this is how we can craft the day, and so that we can give teachers, whether in staff meetings, before, after school, time to have that dialogue. They are the experts, and given that time, we will see better instructional shifts in how the delivery of history, social science is being delivered. And then assessments. How do we know it's working? How do we know that that this new approach to teaching history and social studies is working? How can we develop assessments around that? Doesn't necessarily need to be paper and pencil. Maybe these are exhibitions that kids are doing. Maybe the students in middle school are doing a presentation to the elementary school, or the high school students are presenting something to the Board of Education or the school site council. So all of those are opportunities to assess their learning, but in an authentic and real life manner. And then promote innovation. If your teachers are thinking, wow, we could do something really different here, let's see if we can pull in maybe our math teachers to look at data, we could do something around the science, but then we can look at the historical significance. So those kind of innovative projects that teachers often don't have time to do, but given that protected time, can really look at a different way of delivering this curriculum that is accessible, equitable, and challenging for all students. So we're here to help you. In Los Angeles County, this is our LACO CLIC team, and we're available to support you. Michelle Herzog, you heard from her earlier. Through her, you can get one of these great looking people. Who took this picture? This is great. And actually get face-to-face time with them. They will go out to your district. Regionally, they'll go out. They'll do some presentations. They have the opportunity to be in classrooms and give feedback. We're also looking at some virtual mini lessons that can be available. And then if you have any ideas, we certainly are happy to engage and consider those also.
And Yvonne, the magic words, no cost.
Yes.
And yeah, take advantage of this by the end of the fiscal year too, if you would, by June.
You have access to all of these people at no cost. They are waiting anxiously to go out and help support you. So again, if your school is in another region, you can reach out to your county office. We do have the region leads in the Google Drive with their email, and there's something similar to this is going in other parts of the state too, where they're talking through it. Each region is doing maybe a slightly different approach, but the materials, the communities of practice, the resources, we've all come together and worked very diligently, long and hard, and vetted the very best for you. So some additional CLIC support. I guess we can't emphasize at no cost so much, because so often we prepare these workshops and there is a cost for them. But again, through the support of CDE and the Sacramento County Office of Education, there's no cost. So coming up, April 30th, that's next month, economics is not just for high schools anymore. So Jim Charkins, an amazing presenter, will be looking at how economics, you can use it in your actually third grade classrooms, first, second, and third grade classrooms. Early ed, he has a great presentation by using children's literature in grades K-3. He talks about, economics. He talks about, oops, what happened there? And then obviously going through grades 4 to 11. Very interactive. and very take it back to your classroom and use it the next day. Geography for the K-12 instruction, and we have Tom Herman, great presenter, lots of best practices and resources for looking at that discipline of geography. I love listening to him. I learn something new every time I hear him speak. So, you know, how do you think like a geographer? And what kinds of resources will effectively support those students in becoming geographically thinking students? So again, that higher level and that inquiry-based instruction. Specialized topics for regions 8, 9, 10, and 11, and that is Santa Barbara, Ventura, San Diego, and Laco, Los Angeles. So these are those topics that we mentioned earlier. There's some specialized topics, a day of support around teaching about the Armenian genocide, implementing the FAIR Act, civic learning for all, and the Bracero program, economic and cultural impact in our state of California. So we know that this change can be difficult, and it is a journey. It's not a one and done. It's not an event that I go to a training for one day and it magically happens. We know that there's challenges, and we know that it takes time, but that the work that's put in can really be invigorating and renewing and challenging and will impact every student's life. We know that improved teaching and learning and deepening those common goals can result in some powerful, powerful learning, powerful changes in teaching, and powerful experiences that children will have that will prepare them for life far beyond our classrooms. We can't even measure the impact, but I think it's a unique time right now that we come together. We have the resources, we have the documents, and we have the support that can really help us implement it. We have a small window of time right now. If we don't open that window and go through it, the potential of going back to that very simplistic level 1, read the chapter, answer the questions, test on Friday could be back with us. So my challenge to everybody is to take this opportunity, open that window, open that framework, take advantage of these resources and the communities of practice, and let's really put history, social science, and let's turn it on its ear and really bring it to the forefront, because it is a topic that will make a difference in the lives of children, but not only children, but our nation as a whole. So, questions about this? Frank Peasy is the Director of History Social Science, and he is leading this charge, this CLICK project out of the Sacramento County Office of Education. Our Dr. Michelle Herzog, you all know her. She's our Coordinator of History Social Science here at LACO, one of the most active projects and units in the Division of Curriculum and Instruction. And then myself as the Division Director and also the lead for the History Social Science subcommittee of CSESA. So we're here to help you, and we would welcome your phone calls, we would welcome your emails, and would love to see you out in your school districts to support you with this great project. Michelle, do you have any final words?
No, just thank you all for tuning in and your energy and interest in helping your teachers support the new framework. Like Yvonne said, we're here to help. And if you're not in LA County, we've got a system and a structure in place for someone at your county office to come out to you as well. So we're very fortunate to have this kind of funding and support. We don't see it much for social studies, so we're trying to take full advantage of it. And thank you again, Yvonne, for your wonderful support at the state level, and to Frank and all of them working on the project. It's very exciting.
So in your Google Doc, you have the registration information, and even though you are, it doesn't matter what county you're in, you can attend any of these. So you see there's some in Ventura, they welcome you. We have a number in LA, San Diego. So as your schedule permits, it doesn't have to be in your own county. You can attend any of these in these 4 regions, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So thank you all very much. Have a great rest of the week, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right, let's see what's in the chat room. In meeting. Okay, so we need somebody for the shared Google Drive. Okay, so we need to send out that Google Drive.
It looks like someone found
Somebody
it.
found it, okay. What would you say to reluctant teachers who act like the new framework doesn't exist? Oh, well, I would introduce them to it. Yeah. So
Okay, good.
we can respond to that. So that's pretty good.
Good.
All right.
Very nice. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you.